You hear the knock first, not as sound, but as a rupture, a tearing in the fabric of the ordinary evening. 3 sharp raps against wood that splinter the silence like axe blows. And in that instant, before anyone moves, before anyone breathes, the world divides into before and after, into the moment when you were safe and the moment when safety became a memory. This is Amsterdam, the Jordaan district, winter 1943, and outside your window the canal water is black, thick like oil, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything. The street lamps have been extinguished, regulations, blackout protocols, so the city exists in a permanent twilight, neither day nor night, just this gray, suspended state where time moves differently, where minutes stretch into hours and hours collapse into seconds, depending on whether you're hiding or being hunted. Your name is Jakob, 38 years old, though your face looks older, etched with lines that weren't there 3 years ago, when the occupation began, when everything changed. You are a bookbinder, or were, before Jewish businesses were closed, before your shop was seized, before your trade became another casualty of the new order. Your hands still carry the smell of leather and glue, muscle memory that persists even when the work is stopped, even when the purpose has been stripped away. The apartment is small, 3 rooms on the 2nd floor of a narrow building that leans slightly to the left, as if the weight of history is too much to bear upright. The walls are thin, so thin you can hear the Vandenberg family arguing next door, hear their radio playing forbidden BBC broadcasts at night, hear their daughter crying, always crying, because she's hungry, because everyone is hungry, because occupation tastes like sawdust bread and ersatz coffee and the metallic tang of fear that coats your tongue and never quite goes away. Your wife, Rachel, freezes at the stove, a pot of watery turnip soup suspended in her hands, steam rising around her face like a veil. In the lamplight, she looks ethereal, ghostly, as if she's already fading, already becoming one of the disappeared. Her eyes meet yours, and in them you see the same calculation you're making, the same rapid assessment of possibilities. The hidden room, the space behind the false wall in the bedroom, barely large enough for 2 people, airless, dark, a tomb you've prepared just in case this moment arrived. Your daughter, Sarah, 11 years old, sits at the small table, homework spread before her, arithmetic problems she's not allowed to do in school anymore, because Jewish children aren't allowed in schools anymore, aren't allowed anywhere, exist in a shrinking circle of permitted spaces that grows smaller each week, each day. She's learned to be quiet, unnaturally quiet for a child, has learned that visibility is danger, that the best strategy for survival is to take up as little space as possible, to breathe shallowly, to move like smoke, like shadow, like something that might not be there at all if you don't look directly at it. The knock comes again, harder this time, more insistent, accompanied by a voice, German, clipped, authoritative, demanding entrance, demanding compliance, and your body moves before your mind can catch up, muscle memory of a different kind, the practiced choreography of terror. You gesture to Rachel, to Sarah, toward the bedroom, toward the hiding place, but Sarah's papers are still on the table, evidence, proof of prohibited education, and Rachel moves to gather them, her hands shaking so badly the papers scatter, floating to the floor like autumn leaves, like surrender. Time fractures. Each second contains multitudes. You could ignore the knock, pretend no one is home, but the lamplight visible through the window betrays you, condemns you. You could run, but there's nowhere to run. The building is surrounded, always surrounded. Escape routes that seemed possible in daylight dissolve in darkness, in the geometry of occupied cities where every exit is watched, every street a potential trap. You could fight,
But with what? Your hands that know only books, leather, the delicate work of restoration, not the brutal arithmetic of violence. The knock becomes pounding, fist against wood, and then a boot, the door shuddering in its frame. You move to answer, because not answering is worse, because delay suggests guilt, because the rules of this new world are clear. Comply immediately, demonstrate submission, prove your acceptance of your own diminishment, or face consequences that have no name, no limit, no appeal. Your hand touches the door handle, cold metal against your palm, and you think, in that instant before opening, of all the other doors you've opened, the shop door every morning, pulling up the shade, arranging books in the window, waiting for customers who came to discuss literature, philosophy, the ideas that made life worth living. You think of your wedding day, carrying Rachel across the threshold of your first apartment, both of you laughing, young, certain that love was armor enough against whatever the world might bring. You think of Sarah's birth, the hospital room opening, the nurse handing you this small, impossible miracle, this creature made of hope and promise and future. And now, this door, this moment, this threshold between one life and another, between existence and erasure. You open it. The hallway is dark, but not empty. A figure stands there, uniform gray-green in the dim light. Wehrmacht, an officer, you can tell by the insignia, by the way he stands, by the authority that radiates from him like heat or cold. Behind him, shadows, other men, other uniforms, the machinery of occupation made manifest in flesh and weapon and absolute certainty. He looks at you, this officer, his face young, younger than yours, perhaps 25, perhaps younger, with pale eyes that could be blue or gray. You can't tell in this light, can't tell anything except that he has the power, all the power, and you have none. And in his hand, a folded paper, official, typed, a list, and you know what lists mean, what they've meant for 3 years, what they will mean tonight. This is how it happens, you think. This is how we disappear. 3 knocks on a door, a list, a moment when everything you've built, everything you've loved, becomes negotiable, becomes subject to the will of strangers who've decided that your existence is a problem to be solved. But you don't know yet, can't know, what comes next. You only know that nothing, nothing at all, will ever be the same.
You step back instinctively, creating space the way animals create space when confronted by predators. And the officer enters, not forcefully, not with the violence you've heard about, the smashed furniture, the overturned tables, the brutality that accompanies these visits like a signature. Instead, he moves carefully, almost respectfully, and this restraint is somehow more terrifying than violence would be, because you cannot predict it, cannot prepare for courtesy from a man in that uniform, carrying that authority, holding that list. Behind him, 2 soldiers, younger still, perhaps 19, boys really, with rifles slung across their shoulders, their faces blank, emptied of expression, the way faces become when people have decided not to see, not to know, not to acknowledge the humanity of those they're instructed to process, to relocate, to eliminate. The euphemisms pile up like snow, covering the truth, making everything clean and white and acceptable. The officer removes his cap, tucks it under his arm, and this gesture, this small concession to civilian protocol, makes your throat tighten, because it suggests he remembers, knows that there was a time when entering a home meant observing certain courtesies, certain acknowledgments of shared humanity. But that time is gone, dissolved in regulations and orders and the steady erosion of everything that once made people people, rather than categories, classifications,
problems. Jakob Levinson, he says, not a question, a statement, reading from the paper in his hand. Your name in his accent, the hard consonants, the precise enunciation, sounds like a sentence being pronounced, like the final word in a judgment you weren't present to contest. You nod, unable to speak, your voice trapped somewhere behind the fear that has solidified in your chest, like ice, like the canal water outside, frozen and impenetrable. His eyes move past you, scanning the room, the small table with Sarah's scattered papers, the stove where Rachel stands motionless, the soup still steaming, the mundane details of a life interrupted, a life that was never supposed to be interesting to anyone, never supposed to matter to the machinery of states and armies and the grand projects of those who believe some lives are worth more than others, some lives are worth nothing at all. Your wife, he says, Rachel Levinson, née Cohen, and your daughter, Sarah, born March 1932. He recites these facts, these intimate details of your existence, as if reading a grocery list, items to be collected, accounted for, transported. And you understand, with a clarity that feels like drowning, that you are not people to him, cannot be people, because people have names and faces and stories, and what he's been asked to do only becomes possible when you strip all that away, when you reduce human beings to entries on a list, numbers to be processed, problems to be solved. Rachel moves, finally, stepping forward, placing herself between the officer and the bedroom, between the officer and Sarah, her body becoming a shield, inadequate, futile, but the only thing she has to offer. Mothers do this, you think, have always done this, position themselves between their children and danger, between their children and the world's cruelty, as if love alone might be enough, as if will might be armor, as if anything could stop what's coming. The officer looks at her, and something crosses his face, too quick to read, too complex to parse. Not pity. You've learned to recognize pity, the way it looks like kindness but tastes like condescension. This is something else, something that might be recognition, the flicker of seeing, really seeing another person, before training and orders and ideology slam the door shut again. There has been a mistake, he says, and your heart stops, actually stops, because mistakes can mean anything, can mean a reprieve, or can mean something worse than you imagined, can mean they've come for the wrong family, or they've come for the right family, but for different reasons, darker reasons, the kind that don't involve lists and processing, but involve the cellar rooms you've heard about, the interrogations, the sessions where they extract information, or confessions, or simply screams, whatever serves the purpose. He continues, his voice quiet, almost gentle, and this gentleness is the most frightening thing yet. The order was for tomorrow, the morning transport, not tonight. He folds the paper, returns it to his pocket, and you cannot breathe, cannot process what this means. A reprieve of hours, one night, one final night before the transport, before the trains that everyone knows about, that no one speaks about, that carry people east to places with names like Westerbork, Auschwitz, names that have become synonyms for disappearance, for the end of stories. But then he does something unexpected. He glances behind him toward the two soldiers waiting in the hallway, and his hand moves, a small gesture, dismissive, sending them back, down the stairs, and you hear their boots, heavy, receding, the sound of temporary salvation or temporary damnation. You cannot tell which. The officer turns back to you, and now you're alone, The three of you and this man in this uniform, this representative of the machinery that has decided your family is expendable, disposable, suitable for elimination. His hand reaches into another pocket, produces something, papers, different papers, not official, not typed, handwritten, and he extends them toward you, his arm crossing the space between enemy and enemy, between the one with power and the ones with none. Travel documents, he says, his voice barely above a whisper, for the Visser family, Christian ID cards, work permits for the munitions factory in Eindhoven. They're real, taken from actual records, people who died in the bombings last month. The ages are approximate, close enough. He pauses, and in that pause you hear everything he's not saying, the risk he's taking, the line he's crossing, the betrayal of every order, every oath, every structure of authority that defines his existence. Your hands won't move, won't reach for the papers, because this cannot be real, cannot be happening. Trap, your mind screams. This is a trap, a test, a way to identify resistors, sympathizers, to catch you in the act of attempting escape, so the punishment can be worse, so the example can be more complete. But his eyes, those pale eyes in the lamplight, hold something you haven't seen in 3 years, something that looks like shame, like guilt, like the terrible weight of knowing you're part of something monstrous and choosing, in this one moment, to be something else. Why, you manage, the words scraping out of your throat like broken glass. He doesn't answer immediately. His gaze moves to Sarah, still frozen at the table, her small hands gripping the edge, knuckles white. And when he speaks, his voice is different, hollowed out, emptied. I have a daughter, he says, in Stuttgart. She's 9, and yesterday I received a letter, her handwriting, asking when I'm coming home, asking what I do here, asking if I'm being brave, if I'm making her proud. He stops, swallows, and you see his throat working, see the muscles in his jaw clench. I cannot answer her, he continues. I cannot tell her what I do here, what I've done, what I've been ordered to do, and still call it brave, still call it anything but. He trails off, cannot finish, or will not. The papers hang in the air between you, an offering, a lifeline, a betrayal of everything his uniform represents. Take them, he urges, urgent now. Tonight, before dawn, the checkpoints change shifts at 4. There's a window, 15 minutes, when the guards are confused, distracted. Go south, not north. Everyone goes north toward the ports, but they're watching the ports. Go south, toward Belgium, toward France. The lines are more porous there, the patrols less frequent. He pushes the papers closer, and finally, your hand moves, takes them, feels their weight, lighter than air, heavier than stone. I cannot do this again, he whispers, and you understand. He means he cannot do tomorrow, cannot return to your door, cannot look at Sarah and execute the orders, cannot reconcile the man he was.
You don't move at first, cannot move. Your body locked in the paralysis that follows impossible moments. Moments when the world reveals itself to be less fixed than you believed, more malleable, governed not by the iron laws of occupation and order, but by the unpredictable mathematics of individual conscience. The papers in your hand feel alive, pulsing with potential, with danger, with the terrible weight of choice that has been thrust upon you like a burden, like a gift, like both at once. Rachel breaks the spell, her hands on your shoulders, gripping hard enough to hurt, hard enough to anchor you back into the present, into the immediate crisis of survival. Jakob, she whispers, and her voice carries the urgency of a woman who has already begun moving,
already begun calculating, already begun the mental inventory of what can be taken, what must be left, what pieces of a life can fit into the small spaces between heartbeats and checkpoints and the 15-minute window the officer described. You look at the papers again, studying them in the lamplight. The names swim before your eyes. Henrik Wieser, 42, factory worker, Protestant, born in Rotterdam. Anna Wieser, 39, housewife, Protestant, born in Haarlem. Elizabeth Wieser, 12, student. The photographs are there. Faces of people who no longer need their identities. Faces of the dead wearing expressions from before, from when they were alive, from when they believed they had futures. The resemblance is close enough, in the way that all worn faces resemble each other, all thin faces, all faces marked by hunger and fear and the grinding erosion of occupation. Your hair is darker than Henrik Wieser's, but hair can be explained. Dye fades, light changes things, and checkpoint guards don't look too closely at workers, at the machinery of labor that keeps the occupation functioning. They look for Jews, for the markers they've been trained to identify, the features they've been taught to see as other, as threat, as problem. But if you're not Jewish, if your papers say you're not Jewish, then you become invisible again. You slip back into the category of irrelevant, permitted, allowed to exist. We need to pack, Rachel says, already moving toward the bedroom. But you catch her arm, stop her, because this is the moment. This is where the fracture happens, where you must say the thing you've been thinking, the terrible calculation you've been making since the officer left, since you looked at 3 sets of papers and counted 3 members of your family and understood the arithmetic. We can't take everything, you say, and she nods, impatient. I know, 1 bag each, the essentials. We've discussed this, planned for this. But you're shaking your head, and she stops, sees your face, sees what you're about to say, and her expression changes, hardens, becomes something fierce and terrible. No, she says, before you can speak. No, Jakob, no. The Vandenbergs, you say, and the name hangs in the air like an accusation, like a confession. The family next door, the family with the crying daughter, the family who shares your walls, your risks, your terror. Peter Vandenberg, his wife Margriet, their daughter Anna, who is 9, the same age as the German officer's daughter in Stuttgart, 9 years old, and crying herself to sleep every night because hunger hurts, because fear hurts, because being 9 in occupied Amsterdam in 1943 means understanding too much, knowing too much, carrying burdens no child should carry. They're not on the list, Rachel says, her voice hard, pragmatic. They're not Jewish. They're not in immediate danger. We are, Jakob. We are the ones who will be loaded onto trains tomorrow if we don't leave tonight. She's right. Of course she's right. The Vandenbergs are Gentile, collaborators even. Peter works for the distribution office, helping allocate ration cards, helping maintain the systems that keep the occupation running smoothly. They're complicit. They're guilty. They're part of the machinery. But you've heard them through the walls, heard Peter crying late at night when he thinks no one can hear, heard him telling Margriet that he hates what he does, hates himself for doing it, but it keeps them fed, keeps them safe, keeps Anna alive. And you've heard Anna, her small voice, asking why the Jewish children don't come to school anymore, asking where they went, asking questions her parents won't answer, can't answer, because the truth is too large, too terrible, too complicit. There are 4 sets of papers, you say quietly, and Rachel's eyes widen, her face draining of color. 4, Jakob. The officer gave us 3 for our family. He risked everything to give us 3. But you're shaking your head, pulling the papers out again, counting them in the lamplight. Henrik Wieser and Anna, and there, you see it now, what you missed in the first shock. Margareta Wieser, 68, mother of Henrik, widow, and Johannes Wieser, 15, son of Henrik, student. 4 identities, 4 lives, 4 chances. The officer gave you more than your family needed, gave you excess, gave you choice. Did he know? Did he count your family and give you extra? Or was it accident, bureaucratic oversight, 4 papers grabbed from a file instead of 3? You'll never know, but the result is the same. You have more than you need, and next door, through walls so thin you can hear breathing, a family has nothing. We can't save everyone, Rachel says, and her voice breaks, cracks like ice. We can't, Jakob. We have to save ourselves, have to save Sarah. We have to survive. She's crying now, silent tears running down her face, and you understand. She's not cruel, not heartless. She's a mother, and a mother's first duty is to her child, her own child, not the children next door, not the children of collaborators, not the 9-year-old girl whose father helps maintain the systems that marked your family for destruction. But you think of the officer, his pale eyes, his daughter's letter, the choice he made that went against every order, every structure, every rational calculation of risk and reward. He could have done his duty, could have followed orders, could have stayed safe within the machinery, within the systems that protect those who comply. But he chose differently, chose to see, chose to act, chose to become something other than what his uniform demanded. Sarah speaks, the first words she said since the knock on the door. "Anna is my friend," she says, small voice, uncertain but clear. "We used to play together before. We used to share dolls, and she gave me her bread once when I was hungry. She gave me half her bread and told her mother she wasn't hungry even though she was. I know she was. I could see it in her eyes." The room falls silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second a hammer blow, each minute a countdown to dawn, to the checkpoint shift change, to the 15-minute window that will open and close, like a door, like a gate, like the difference between life and death. You make the decision, and even as you make it, you know Rachel is right. Know you're risking everything. Know you're gambling with your family's survival on a 9-year-old girl's kindness, on bread shared in better times, on the thin hope that mercy might be contagious, that the officer's choice might inspire your own, that small acts of humanity might compound, might multiply, might mean something in the face of machinery designed to crush humanity into nothing. "I'm going next door," you say, and Rachel grabs your arm, her grip desperate. "Jakob, please, we don't have time. We don't have—" But you're already moving, papers in hand, opening your door, stepping into the hallway that suddenly feels vast, infinite, a space where anything might be waiting. Guards, informers, the officer returned to correct his mistake, to reclaim the extra papers, to restore the proper order. 3 steps to the Vandenberg door. You knock softly, urgently, and the door opens immediately, as if Peter was standing there, listening. He looks at you, shock on his face, because Jews don't knock on Gentile doors anymore, don't seek out their neighbors, don't risk the contamination, the association, the danger that comes from proximity to the marked, the condemned, the disposable. "We're leaving," you say, no preamble, no explanation, tonight, before dawn, and we have papers, extra papers for a family, for 4 people, and You stop, because how do you say this? How do you offer life to someone whose daily work contributes to your death? How do you extend mercy to someone who exists within the systems of your destruction? But Peter understands, his eyes going to the papers in your hand, his face transforming, terror and hope and guilt and gratefulness all at once. "We can't," he whispers. We're not on any lists. We're safe here. We have work. We have..." But even as he says it, you can hear the lie. You can hear how thin safety has become, how fragile. The bombings are increasing. The Allies are coming. And when they do, what happens to collaborators, to those who helped maintain the occupation, to men who distributed ration cards while their neighbors starved? "Your daughter," you say, and his face crumbles. "Anna, she gave Sarah bread. She was kind, when kindness was dangerous, when it would have been safer to look away, to ignore, to forget." You extend the papers.
The checkpoints change at 4. 15 minutes. South toward Belgium, not north. You have to leave now. You have to
You move through the streets like ghosts. 8 people who have already begun erasing themselves, becoming the names on the papers rather than the names you were born with. Henrik and Anna and Margarita and Johannes Visser, and Peter becomes Henrik's brother, Margriet becomes a cousin. The stories assembling themselves in whispers as you walk, creating the architecture of lies that might keep you alive, might carry you through the checkpoint, might transform you from hunted to invisible. The cold is different at 3 in the morning, sharper, more personal, as if winter itself is conspiring with the occupation. The streets are empty, curfew, and every footstep echoes against the brick buildings, against the cobblestones, sounds that seem impossibly loud, that seem designed to announce your presence, to alert the patrols, to betray your flight. Sarah walks between you and Rachel, her small hand gripping yours so tightly you can feel her pulse, rapid, frightened, the heartbeat of a child who understands too much, who has learned that the world is not safe, has never been safe, will never be safe again. Behind you, the Vandenbergs, Peter carrying Anna, the girl's face buried in his shoulder, her breathing audible in the silence, small gasps that might be crying, might be fear, might be the beginning of understanding what this night means, what they're leaving behind, what they might never return to. Margriet walks beside him, her hand on his back, steadying, supporting, the two of them moving as one organism, as marriage does in crisis, when language fails and only touch remains. The checkpoint appears ahead, a barrier across the street, floodlights creating a circle of harsh white illumination, a stage, a theater where your performance must be perfect, where one wrong word, one hesitation, one flicker of fear in your eyes might unravel everything. Guards stand in small groups, smoking, their cigarettes like fireflies in the darkness, and you can hear them talking, German, casual, bored, the conversation of men performing a tedious duty, processing the endless flow of workers, the machinery of occupation that never stops, never sleeps, never questions. You check your watch, 3:58. 2 minutes until the shift change, 2 minutes until the window opens. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a drum, a warning, a countdown. Rachel's hand finds yours, squeezes once, a communication beyond words. I love you. I'm terrified. We might die here. We might survive here. Either way, we're together. Either way, we chose this. Either way, we're more than what they tried to make us. 4 o'clock. A whistle blows, sharp, authoritative, and the guards begin their change, the night shift moving away from the checkpoint, the day shift approaching, and for perhaps 30 seconds, perhaps 45, there's confusion, overlapping authority, men signing papers, exchanging information, the bureaucratic handoff that creates a crack, a seam, a moment when the machinery isn't quite synchronized. Now, you whisper, and the 8 of you step forward, into the light, into the glare that makes everything visible, that strips away shadow and anonymity and the small protections darkness provides. A guard looks up, young, maybe 20, his face smooth, unlined, barely old enough to shave, and he gestures impatiently. Papers, schnell, quickly. You hand them over, your hand steady despite everything, despite the terror, despite the knowledge that these papers are all that stand between you and the trains, between you and the camps, between the ending that everyone knows about, that no one can speak about, that exists in whispers and rumors, and the terrible silence of those who don't return.
His eyes study them, moving from the photographs to your faces, comparing, measuring, and time stops, expands, each second containing infinities, containing all possible futures collapsing into this single moment of scrutiny. Factory workers, he says, not a question, reading from the papers. Eindhoven, munitions, essential labor. You nod, not trusting your voice, and beside you Rachel does the same, and Sarah, brave Sarah, looks up at the guard with eyes that are too old, too knowing, eyes that have seen things 12-year-old eyes should never see. The guard's gaze lingers on her, and you feel your chest tighten, feel panic rising like water because she looks Jewish. You've always thought she looks Jewish, the features you love, the face that's a perfect blend of Rachel's grace and your mother's strength. But Jewish is a construct, a category imposed from outside, and categories only exist if people enforce them, only matter if this guard decides to see what he's been trained to see. But he's tired. You can see it in his face, in the way he moves, the exhaustion of men who work night shifts, who process hundreds of workers, who've learned that checking papers is tedious, repetitive, boring. He stamps the documents, a thud that sounds like thunder, like salvation, like the closing of a door and the opening of another. Through, he says, waving you forward, already turning to the next group, already moving to the next transaction. You walk, forcing yourself to move normally, not too fast, not too slow, the measured pace of workers heading for their shift, of people who have every right to be here, who belong in this moment, who are permitted, allowed, invisible. And then you're through, past the barrier, past the guards, past the checkpoint that could have been your ending, and the street opens before you, dark, uncertain, but open. You don't run, you walk, 1 block, 2, 3, until the checkpoint lights fade behind you, until the voices of the guards dissolve into the general murmur of the waking city, until you reach the corner where the tram line ends, where the city gives way to suburbs, where suburbs give way to countryside, to the open spaces that might mean freedom, might mean death, might mean anything at all. Only then do you stop. Only then do you allow yourself to breathe, really breathe, pulling air into lungs that feel collapsed, starved, and Rachel leans against you, her body shaking, trembling with released tension, with the aftermath of terror. Sarah buries her face in your coat, and you hold them both, feeling their heartbeats, their warmth, their presence, alive, still alive, given one more day, one more chance to exist in a world that has tried to erase them. Behind you, the Vandenbergs stand separate, maintaining distance, as if proximity might contaminate, might undo the fiction of the papers. But Anna is watching Sarah, and Sarah is watching Anna, and some communication passes between them, wordless, profound, the recognition of children who've shared bread, who've played together, who've been forced to become strangers by systems neither of them chose, neither of them understand, neither of them deserve. Peter approaches, cautious, his face illuminated by the first gray hints of dawn. "Thank you," he says, and the words are inadequate, insufficient, too small for what they're trying to contain. Gratitude and guilt and shame and hope all tangled together into something that has no proper name. "I know what I've done," he continues, his voice breaking. "I know what I've been, what I've helped maintain, and I don't expect, I can't ask for." He stops, unable to finish, unable to articulate the complexity of complicity, the way good people do terrible things, the way survival demands compromise, the way there are no clean hands in occupation, no pure victims, no simple heroes. We all did what we had to do, you say, and even as you say it, you're not sure you believe it, not sure it's true, not sure it excuses anything. But what else is there? What other framework makes sense of the impossible choices, the terrible calculus of who lives and who dies, who collaborates and who resists, who survives with honor and who survives at all? The officer made his choice, you made yours, and the machinery continues, grinds forward, consuming lives and futures and possibilities, indifferent to individual acts of mercy, to small rebellions, to the human moments that insist, despite everything, that people are more than categories, more than numbers, more than problems to be solved. The journey south begins.
Part 5. The Echo of Walls. You cross into Belgium 17 days later. 17 days of walking, hiding, foraging, becoming animals in your own survival, learning the rhythms of patrols, the schedules of checkpoints, the safe hours and the dangerous ones. Your feet are blistered, bleeding through your socks, and Sarah has grown thinner, her face all angles now, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, eyes too large for her shrinking frame. But she's alive. You're all alive, and alive means everything, means the possibility of tomorrow, means the refusal to become statistics, numbers, smoke. The Vandenbergs disappeared on the 8th day. You woke in a forest clearing, and they were gone. No note, no explanation, just absence where presence had been. Perhaps they found another route. Perhaps they were caught. Perhaps they simply chose a different path, different risks, different chances. You'll never know. And this not knowing becomes another weight you carry, another question that will follow you through all the years ahead. Did your choice save them, or merely delay their ending? Or did they survive, rebuild, carry their own impossible memories into whatever future they managed to construct? Belgium offers no safety, only different danger, different uniforms, different languages for the same occupation, the same machinery. But there are networks here, resistance, people who move refugees south toward Spain, toward Portugal, toward the thin hope of neutral territory. You find them, or they find you, the way desperate things find each other in darkness, drawn by shared need, shared humanity, shared refusal to accept that this, all of this, is simply how the world must be. A farmhouse in the Ardennes becomes home for 3 months. The family there, the Beaumonts, hide 6 families in their cellar, a space designed for storing root vegetables, not humans. But humans adapt, compress, make themselves small, make themselves silent, make themselves disappear into the spaces between floorboards and official notice. You sleep in shifts, 20 people breathing the same stale air, sharing the same bucket for waste, the same shame, the same gratitude, the same impossible arithmetic of survival. Madame Beaumont brings food when she can, bread, thin soup, sometimes cheese, once impossibly chocolate, and you watch Sarah's face transform when she tastes it, watches sweetness return to a life that has known only bitterness. Her eyes close, savoring, and for that moment she's just a child again, just a 12-year-old girl tasting chocolate, not a refugee, not a number on a list, not a problem the machinery wants to solve through elimination. But the networks aren't perfect, aren't infallible.
In April 1944, someone talks, intentionally or accidentally, fear or torture or simple exhaustion breaking whatever resolve kept secrets safe. The Gestapo comes. You hear the trucks first, engines in the night, then boots, then shouting, German commands, French pleas, the universal language of violence that needs no translation. Madame Beaumont's voice, screaming, insisting the house is empty, insisting there's nothing to find, and the sound of her being struck, a thud, a gasp, the specific acoustics of brutality. 20 people in the cellar, holding breath, holding children, holding on to each other in the darkness as footsteps move overhead, as furniture is overturned, as the machinery of search and seizure does its methodical work. They don't find you. The false wall holds, the hiding space behind the hiding space, the desperate architecture of resistance remains invisible. And after hours, after the trucks leave, after the sounds fade, you emerge, climb the stairs, find the house destroyed, furniture smashed, windows broken, and Madame Beaumont, unconscious, bleeding, her face a ruin of bruises, but breathing, still choosing even in unconsciousness to protect, to hide, to say no to the men with guns who demanded compliance. You tend her wounds, you and Rachel and the other women, working with torn sheets and cold water, the primitive medicine of occupation. And when she wakes, her first words, not complaint, not anger, not why me, but did they find you? Did anyone? And when you shake your head, when you tell her no, everyone is safe, she smiles, through split lips, through broken teeth, and says, "Good, that's good." You understand then, truly understand, what the officer understood, what you understood when you gave papers to the Vandenbergs, what Madame Beaumont understands as she lies bleeding on her kitchen floor, that there's a choice, always a choice, between seeing people as people or seeing them as categories, as problems, as acceptable losses in service of some larger ideology, some grander vision, some national project that requires the elimination of the inconvenient, the different, the other. And the choice, the real choice, isn't between safety and danger, because danger is everywhere, inevitable. The choice is remaining human or allowing the machinery to transform you into something less, something that can inflict suffering without feeling it, that can follow orders without questioning them, that can look at a child, any child, and see an enemy rather than seeing yourself, your own daughter, your own impossible fragility. The liberation comes in September. Allied forces sweeping through Belgium, the machinery of occupation breaking down, reversing, the occupiers becoming the occupied, running, surrendering, the tables turning with the speed of military fortune. You emerge from the cellar, from the farmhouse, from the long months of hiding, and the sunlight is painful, too bright, too real after so long in darkness. Sarah cries when she sees the soldiers, American soldiers, their uniforms different, their language strange, but their faces, young, tired, marked by their own trauma, their own impossible choices, and one of them, barely older than a boy, kneels down, offers her chocolate, real chocolate from his rations, and she takes it, whispers thank you in English she learned from you, from the lessons you continued in the cellar, the insistence that education continues, that humanity continues, that the future, however impossible, remains worth preparing for. You never return to Amsterdam, cannot return. The city of your birth has become a ghost, a graveyard, and the apartment, your shop, your life before, belongs to someone else now,
to the dead, to the disappeared, to the people you were before 3 knocks on a door changed everything. You go to Paris instead, then to London, rebuilding, slowly, painfully, learning to live with the weight of survival, the guilt of it, the impossible question of why you, why your family, when so many others, millions of others, were swallowed by the machinery, became smoke, became silence, became the terrible arithmetic of genocide. The nightmares never stop. They're different for each of you. Rachel dreams of the checkpoint, dreams the guard sees through the papers, dreams of being pulled from the line, separated, loaded onto trains. She wakes screaming, sometimes silent. Silence is worse. And you hold her, remind her, we made it, we survived, we're here. But survived isn't the same as safe, isn't the same as whole, isn't the same as unburdened by the weight of everything you witnessed, everything you lost, everyone who didn't make it. Sarah grows up, becomes a woman, marries, has children of her own, and you watch her, watch for signs that the trauma has transferred, been inherited, passed down through some invisible genetic mechanism, the way blue eyes pass down, the way musical talent passes down. But she's strong, stronger than you, stronger than the darkness that tried to consume her. She becomes a teacher, teaches history, teaches about the war, about occupation, about the systems that make atrocity possible, and the individuals who choose in small moments to resist, to say no. You never learn the officer's name, spend years trying, researching, writing letters to archives, to veterans associations, to anyone who might have records of Wehrmacht officers stationed in Amsterdam in winter 1943. But the records are incomplete, destroyed, or the officer is dead, or he survived.
Outside, London traffic, horns, voices, the ordinary chaos of a city at peace. Children playing in the park across the street, their laughter rising, pure, uncomplicated. The sound of futures that almost weren't, that exist because of choices made in darkness, in terror, in the small, brave moments when individuals decided that orders weren't absolute, that systems weren't inevitable, that humanity could persist even in the machinery designed to crush it. You close your eyes, feeling the sun on your face, warm, gentle, and you think of the officer one last time, hoping wherever he is, whatever happened to him, that he knows that somehow, impossibly, he understands that his choice mattered, that it rippled forward, that it created futures, that it proved something essential about human nature, about our capacity, even in the darkest systems, even under the worst orders, to choose mercy over cruelty, life over death, humanity over ideology. The afternoon fades. Sarah makes tea. The children settle around the table, and you sit with your family, this impossible family, this collection of souls who shouldn't exist, who were marked for erasure, but who persist, who laugh, who love, who carry forward the weight of survival, the responsibility of remembering, the duty to bear witness. And in that moment, in the warmth of tea and family and the ordinary miracle of continued existence, you understand finally what the officer's choice meant, what your choice meant, what all the small acts of resistance and mercy and human recognition mean. They mean that the machinery doesn't win, not completely, not finally,
They mean that even in the darkest hours, individuals retain the power to choose, to resist, to say no. They mean that love is stronger than fear, that mercy is more powerful than hatred, that the human heart, fragile and imperfect and impossibly brave, can still insist on seeing people as people, even when every structure, every system, every order demands otherwise. The sun sets, casting long shadows across the room, and you hold your granddaughter's hand, feeling her pulse, her warmth, her aliveness, this child who exists because an officer chose mercy, because you chose to share that mercy, because Madame Beaumont chose to hide strangers, because humanity proved again and again, in small moments and large, to be more resilient than the systems designed to destroy it.